Hello everyone and welcome back. In this video I wanted to talk about the approach and how I started the whole idea of the environment creation and give you guys some workflow that you can follow to basically start your own concept or creating an environment. No environment artist by any mean, and everything I do is around Houdini and the technical side of things, but I found this topic to be very Houdini suited, and it contains this specific architecture, and it contains a lot of interesting details that can be replicated, and hopefully while doing that I can explain and teach you guys a lot of things that is related to procedural modeling. And whenever you want to start something, you first have to gather a lot of references. Once you do that, you go and start analyzing what makes this specific type of architecture or environment or mood look the way it is. And after doing a lot of research and gathering, the primary thing that the Gothic architecture that I concluded is they have a specific arches, they have specific arch types, and they have a lot of interesting details on the windows. There is specific shapes and geometry that is used pretty much everywhere, and then the cathedral layout is also very unique. So I took those three main core things and tried to reuse them in my art. And let me show an example. And then from there, I instead of just respecting what the architecture says or what the style is, I wanted to add something of my own. So I created this pillar here, which still has some of the curvature that is related to the Gothic architecture, and I added these windows, which are these shapes, which are a signature of the Gothic architecture. And then all of this is inspired from the Gothic, and we're going to learn how to do that. But this section here and the entire layout is based off the cathedral itself, which is like this. So let me show you some more references and then we'll come back to that. So I did a lot of random gathering, and then I'll show some more specific details. This is an example of the window. This is a very iconic shape in the Gothic architecture, and these details are actually very hard and intricate to create because of the way they blend in together. So this is very tricky geometry to create in Houdini or any other packages unless they're designed for this. And then I also started looking at various construction details to know how they actually create this, and this is very iconic shapes with the Gothic architecture. You can see this shape is being reused pretty much everywhere, where it has a lot of variation, either 3 circles with a smaller arches, or 4, 5, and 6. And you can see those ratios are repeated everywhere in this architecture. And this is another reference of how they constructed a rose window, which is not this one, but the other cathedral. They have a big circular window, and it has a lot of interesting geometry. So this is one of the construction details, and to me this is the main thing that I based my environment off. And you can see there is this section here, and then some pillars, some more windows, and then the vaulting, and then I added the extra arches and pillars of my own to extend the environment. But you can also just do this block, this modular block, and by copying it over and over, you can create something really interesting, which is at the base of how this environment built. So once we look at it this way, it's actually much simpler, and all we have to do is basically get some pillars, some arches, some windows. You can see here also there's a lot of interesting details on this side, and as long as we follow this, we are able to create something very interesting, hopefully. So this is some more construction information. You can see they start off with circles, and then they trim those circles, and they all meet at some point, and then they keep dividing this circle, for example, into 3. You can see it here, and then these 3 are then used in with another part to create these interesting details. It's actually very, very complex, even in CG, if you wanted to do that specific geometry. This is another one that I really liked, and I'm gonna show some ways of doing this, but it's a very complex process, and we're not going to be able to replicate something 100%. It could easily take an entire workshop to find a good system or a good approach to do this, all this geometry, and have nice blends and everything. So we're going to cover a lot of things, but nothing complex when it comes to geometry creation. This is another image that I used as well to inspire the layout that I have. You can see here the section, and it's been repeated over and over, and then I have a circular end, which we can do as well, and then basically a center at the top. So the main interesting part is this block here. If we get that, we're in a good shape. Cool. So this is another window, and these are some railing that we're going to be able to use in Houdini from here, and just grab the silhouettes. This is one I used in some of the details of the environment. These are some roses and some flowers to show the patterns. You can see there's a lot of repetition in terms of details. But we're not going to be recreating that. This is another one that I liked. It's a very old cathedral, and it's all made of, you can see it's handmade bricks, blocks of concrete. So we're going to hopefully be able to do some of that as well. This is another one. You can see here the shapes, the iconic shapes of the Gothic architecture. This is another one that we're going to try and create something similar. We're going to create a procedural system for making this. It looks simple, but actually having this nice cut and having a procedural system where you can just copy the circle and have them extend is actually very it showed up to be much trickier than I thought at the beginning. This part, you can see we have these two, and then it's mirrored, but having this part blend in with this detail is actually very very tricky, but hopefully we're gonna have some ways of doing that. This is another detail that I liked, and we can basically use this ratio because it's very artistic. They do a lot of research and studies to find these good proportions that works in real life. As an engineer, they take care of the engineering part so that the pillars hold whatever they are holding up, but the artistic ratio, the ratio and the rapport between these proportions is very artistic. So we don't have to do a lot of thinking to get this done. We can just copy these ratios and it will look interesting as well. This is very cool detail for the vault back, and I'll show where we can create something like this. This is a construction plane, construction steps for one of the roses, and it's one of the ones I used, but it was very tricky to get all the way up until here unless we draw it by hand. So that's one. This is also a very cool reference that you guys maybe can use. It's the same, and we're back. Cool, so let me show something else. So while doing this, I found a lot of interesting historical books that details everything pretty much about the Gothic architecture. And we're going to be I'm gonna send the links for all these books, but I've grabbed the interesting parts, and they're actually very detailed. So these are the different Gothic arches that they're used. This is, I've not seen this too much. Generally it's this one and this one, but I also have a lot of cool details that I was very happy to see when I found them. So this is an example of the details, and you can see here we have the silhouette of the pillar, and then we have an interesting detail at the bottom. So we're going to be using some of these references to create some of the details, and as when we start doing that, I'm going to show you how to solve these problems and how to create them in Houdini. And we're going to basically be creating this is a perfect image. We're going to be basically creating a pillar and then the main arch, and then we'll go from there and create this section here. We're going to create this section. It's not going to look exactly the same, so we're going to create this section here, and then this part and the back as well, and we'll detail this using something different. And then once we're done, I'm going to go over and show how I did this from scratch, because the approach is very different for this part. And then if we still have time, I'll go in detail over this, or probably next week. Cool, I think that's pretty much it. Let's get started.